All right, in this video, we're going to do a space with Daniel Krawisz. I'm going to talk a little bit about, introduce him before we get started. He is the emperor of Bitcoin, and he wrote the famous, he actually coined the famous term hyperbitcoinization 10 years ago and wrote an article about it. And hyperbitcoinization is basically where it's two essential elements where there are, the first is the fiat. First is the currency hyperinflates with restricted competition from other currencies, where hyperbitcoinization happens because of competition with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin becomes its competition with the hyperinflation. The second is that hyperinflation, the government expands the money supply to outpace the people's inflation expectations. So it's a concept where Bitcoin basically begins to take over it begins to take over the supply of all the world's assets, because it is a truly scarce asset. So we're going to be speaking with him. He's an economics, math and science, and overall just well polished scholar. So, and highly respected in the Bitcoin space. We're going to do an X space. And so we'll open up to Q&A at the end and we'll make it happen. All right. So stand by for none other than Daniel Krawisz, Emperor of Bitcoin. Should be an interesting one. We'll make it fun and exciting. Okay. It's June 3rd, 9 o'clock Pacific time, noon Eastern. We're going to get started today with, actually, let me just share my screen here. 1 second. Share sound. And that's happened before. I didn't do that. Okay. We're going to get started on the X space with Daniel Krawisz, the Emperor of Bitcoin. We talked a little bit about, I already did a short introduction, but he wrote the famous article in 2014 that inspired a lot of people. And you search the word hyperbitcoinization on the internet now, and it's all over the place, and a lot of people have run with it. So it's kind of cool that you coined that phrase. And so, Daniel, how you doing, buddy? Welcome.
Thanks. I'm doing good. And thanks a lot for inviting me.
Hey, I want to, you're welcome. I appreciate it. Brett helped inspired me to get you back on. And we did a show probably like sometime in the fall. Actually, you were the very first podcast I did in the Bitcoin space. And that was not accidental. That was very specifically done because of your Emperor of Bitcoin crown. So, maybe you could get started with a short introduction about your background and who you are for people who just don't know anything about you.
Okay, well, I have degrees in physics and software engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. And it was around when I was getting those degrees that I first got into Bitcoin. I was introduced to Bitcoin by Ross Ulbricht, but I didn't actually get any at the time because he couldn't really explain it to me. So, but once there was a market on Mt. Gox, that's sort of when I thought that it could be working. And that was based on, Ross Ulbricht couldn't explain to me how Bitcoin would get a price because it didn't have one at the time. And the Austrian theory of money would suggest that there's a problem with a monetary good being initially traded, and that it would have to have some kind of use value prior to being a monetary good. But once it had a market, then it's sort of like it's unclear how it initially attained that price. But at that point, then it could get better. It could grow from there. So for a while, I was just talking about Bitcoin with my friends, and I had a libertarian group at the university, and we also did a crypto anarchy group, and that's where we talked about Bitcoin a whole lot. But we also talked about some of these other things. Of course, at the time, we did think that Bitcoin was a cypherpunk thing. We didn't, anyway. Um, but um, uh, but if eventually I started the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute with some of my friends, and that's where I got well known. And some of the main topic that I tried to discuss over there is the economic value of money according to the Austrians. So the Austrian theory of the value of money, but I don't think anybody has ever understood that. So it seems like kind of a waste of time, really. I'm not sure. I've never heard anybody explain the Austrian theory of money back to me in a way that sounds like they got it to me. But anyway, but I came up with some memes that were later hijacked by the BTC crowd, like Hyperbitcoinization, and eventually that whole organization was taken over. So I had to leave it, and that's about when the split happened. Oh, and let me see if I can show you.
So
Sorry, I'm
back,
looking for a
it's okay.
URL here.
You were backtracking a little bit. You were saying that initially you thought that Bitcoin was was for the cypherpunks, and then you were going into the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute. Why did you think it was for cypherpunks only? What was the?
Well, I mean, it cites the white paper cites Adam Back and these other cypherpunks and Wei Dai, and the cypherpunks, those were the people that we knew of who had been thinking about electronic cash before that point. So I mean, now I know that there were other people at the time, but as far as I knew, it was really only the cypherpunks who had that idea.
And what
They
was
were
your
kind of in the trenches.
Yeah.
what was your like interest? Like you read the paper, you met Ross. How did it click? What was the clicking moment? The aha.
Well, the moment when I saw that it had a price on Mt. Gox.
That was the moment. Once it
Yeah,
developed a
because
price.
what?
So once it had a price, you realized it was economically valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I had an objection from Austrian economics, from Ludwig von Mises' idea of the regression theorem. So I didn't know about proof of work back then. So what I think is going on is, because we have proof of work. So like, let's say, like, there's kind of a problem with saying that a good is going to become money when it has no other use for it. I mean, so why are people going to start acquiring it? Because it is a medium of exchange, right? So you have to get it first, then you have to keep it for a while, and then you spend it later. So why are people getting it in the first place if, as far as they know, there isn't anybody else who's acquiring it or no opportunities to spend it? So according to Mises, there needs to be some initial reason to acquire the good that has nothing to do with its potential use as money. And so I think that what happened was, because we have this proof of work system in Bitcoin, there's something kind of different about Bitcoin versus other potential monetary goods, which is that you can actually see that there are other people acquiring it, because you can see these blocks, and you can see that people are putting work into getting it. And hence the idea that people might start acquiring the good entirely as a speculation on the possibility that it will become money starts to make more sense because of that. So I think that kind of explains the objection that I initially had. But once it had a price, then it doesn't matter how it started being traded in the first place. At that point, it's kind of like however it got there. Now at this point, it's overcome my objection somehow.
So then you mentioned was it the Nakamoto Institute, and you're saying that was taken over?
Yeah. So early on, people didn't like, well, not everybody, but there were some people early on who didn't like Satoshi, and not, of course, now people don't like Satoshi because of the big blocks and the payment network. But back around 2013 or so, people didn't like Satoshi because, well, geez, I mean, it's hard for me to say any particular reason for it, but I think that people were just kind of coming in with
So
with
Satoshi had a
complete.
bad name at the time. Is that what you're saying, or what was the?
I mean, I think people just wanted to come in and just go in different directions. I was not aware of anybody who was maliciously trying to forget Satoshi. It seemed like people were coming in without really understanding much about what the idea of Bitcoin is. So we collected all of his old posts to put them on the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute so that they would be easy to read through. And I also did some blogging, and my blogging was mainly supposed to be about Austrian economics and bringing in ideas from libertarians about the nature of money. So, I mean, I guess I would say many people interpreted the message in the Genesis block as saying that Bitcoin was a subversive idea that was in opposition to fiat
Banks.
money. Yeah,
Like, it was supposed to take the banks down. That was kind of like the message that people interpreted because of the.
yeah. And well, Craig Wright has later repudiated that idea, but I don't know. I don't know if he just changed his mind. Like, to me, it's very weird how we would put that message in the Genesis block and then say that it doesn't really mean anything. It was just the newspaper headline for that day.
Hmm.
I'm not sure I really believe that, but uh, people didn't like the idea that Bitcoin was in competition with fiat money, and so to be more specific, I mean, Bitcoin is in opposition to the banks, but it's in opposition to the banks in terms of the Swift network. So there can still be banks, but if we are using Bitcoin, we don't need the Swift network anymore.
I see. It's a
But
different payment system that the banks could use.
yeah, but the problem is that the Swift network and all of these hub and spokes or these mesh networks that are controlled by special interests. They're all tools of control. Excuse me. So it's not like it's not like the banking industry is necessarily going to want to embrace something that replaces the Swift network with something a lot better. And it's just the same as how people in BTC want the Lightning network, because then that lets them mooch off of people a lot more, and gives them a less control. So now at the time, I didn't understand about being able to issue tokens on Bitcoin. To me, Bitcoin was just a money system, and the Satoshi was the money good. And I mean, it seems like that's what Satoshi was also saying at the time, because he was saying the name coin ought to be a separate blockchain. So but I like him a lot better now that he's saying we need one blockchain. I never liked that idea of having a separate
Oh,
different blockchains for things. That's kind of dumb. I mean, So the thing I really like about Bitcoin is we have this collective security when you come into it, and what we just don't really have that with other things as much. I think other networks that people have designed have a much greater tendency to be taken over by exploiters.
Collective
And
security. Can you,
yeah,
what is that?
well, that means we all become more secure by being part of the network. That's the network effect. It gets better the more nodes, the more people join it.
Collective security.
Yeah. So of course the money aspect of Bitcoin, that's a big part of it, but that's not the only part. The timestamp server aspect of Bitcoin, that helps out a lot too, because we don't have to rely on somebody with trust and reputation to tell us when things happened or when they existed. Now it's all public and can't be manipulated. So anyway, I have a link that I'm going to. Okay, I don't know how to get to the tweet for the.
How does he get to the, how does he get to that nest, Mila?
Sorry, how do you post in the nest, you mean?
Please.
I think that when it's your own space, it might be a little bit different, but if you just make a normal post and then you right click as if to share it, then you can choose to put it in the space.
Yeah, but how do I get to the tweet? Didn't you promote the space at some point? How do I get to that tweet? I just wanted to reply to it.
Ah, yeah, and you just click it from in here and then you can reply to it because it takes you to the post itself.
Okay, well, I found it. It was in my my notifications. Anyway, sorry for the. I'm trying to post a link here.
So, so while you're doing that, let me just, so you're giving us some background here on like, what's going on in your history of Bitcoin. And, I really, I have a lot of questions. I'm sure a lot of people do, but I want to kind of like set the groundwork here where you're going with this story. And, you mentioned Craig Wright, you mentioned some interesting things about the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute. I'd like to hear that. I'm sure there's something interesting about the Emperor of Bitcoin story that's happened. And really, we want to see like how Bitcoin, in your opinion, is going to change everything in the future, or has already changed everything, with your perspective. So, I mean, I'm just continue on. So you're telling us right now with your basically where you're at is, what are you in, like 2014, and this, kind of getting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now I have a tweet here. Is there any way to make it the pin tweet in the space?
Mila, can you do that?
Yes, I can do that. Did you put something as a reply to this one that I posted up here? Yeah.
Well, look, you can look for it, Mila, while he's talking. That would be just
no. I posted it in reply. Okay.
Okay.
I
I'll
posted
find
a link.
Thank you,
posted
Dave.
a link to the tweet.
Thank you.
Okay.
She'll find it, Daniel. Continue.
Yeah. So So Bitcoin was being taken over around 2014. I mean, it started a lot earlier than that, but it wasn't really that obvious. I wasn't really aware that anything was going on, and I knew there were people who were for small blocks, but I thought that idea was so dumb. I didn't really believe that was going to be a big deal or anything. So
you weren't too concerned about the block size war.
Yeah. So, but starting around 2014, I wasn't able to post anything in the Nakamoto Institute anymore.
Oh, you got blocked out.
Yeah, I lost my voice. So I was trying to think about how to explain to people what's so important about Bitcoin. So that's when I started working on this story that I posted here that Smila just retweeted it. So I'm hoping somebody can put it in the pin tweet for the space, and then you can all look at it. But this was a story that I was working on, and it's about an island, and there are these creatures on the island that are demi-aquatic. So they're like when the ruminants were evolving into dolphins. And there's a creature called Yem that also lives on the island that has it floats above it and has it's like the Hydra. It has many heads,
The
and
Hydra.
it has enough for all of the people in the island. So this creature called Yem has stood between everybody, and it has destroyed individual friendships, and it's everybody's best friend. And so it's the center of the network, and nobody else has any connectivity. And that's where things are moving if we don't have Bitcoin. If in Bitcoin there is a competition for greater connectivity. Now this story doesn't really have Bitcoin in it because I didn't really know how to draw that at the time. So what it has is the alternative to Bitcoin. And so Yem is kind of like the AIs that we have now. He's like something that can talk to everybody at the same time, and he can discover everybody's weakness and use it against them, because his power of intelligence is greater than all of the individuals, and they've lost their collective intelligence because he's stood between all of them.
So I'm seeing say mama on one side with three. There's a baby, and then what looks like a mom and dad, and then they got no say, and then we got no say Yem on the right with the purple creature.
Yeah, but it's still not the pin tweet. Can you make it the pin tweet so everybody can see it?
Well, it's a link to an Imager album, by the way. So that might be tricky. You might have to make a new tweet with just the images or something.
Well, no, but that's just it's You go to the I mean, I just want to pass the link to people so that they can look at it.
Is it imgur.com?
Yeah.
It's in the it's in a reply to the main tweet right now. Looks like. And so
Yo, I got you 2 seconds.
Oh
yeah, I can see it.
Do I? Yeah. So. Yeah, it's on the reply. It's down in the reply is what it is, and yeah. So either way, we'll figure it out if there's some other better way to do it.
Well, I mean, there's a pinned tweet right here. It says from Smila's. It says served to us by Daniel Krawisz, Satoshi.nakamotoinstitute.org. Just replace that with the tweet
Mehl,
that
please
I just
replace
made.
that in the nest with the one he's got. So she'll do that.
Yeah, I did already. You just have to slide. You see there's 3 dots. That means that there is already 3 posts up in the nest.
Oh, Okay.
I
Well,
s- on the right.
I don't see it. I don't
You
understand how.
slide it sideways. You just push it sideways, and it will show you the post.
Okay, the Bitcoin broadcast put it on the very first one. There it is.
You can also
Oh,
touch
here we
the
go.
dots. You can as well
So it's
touch the
all
dots.
okay. Thanks. Yeah, it's all the way to the left. Okay, great. Okay. Okay, thanks. Yeah. So yeah, I'm using a desktop, so I don't have a way to slide anything.
No say
But I
data.
found it. I found it. Okay, so anyway, you can go to that album. This is how I was trying to explain to people why we need Bitcoin. And so this is the world. You know, this I made this in 2014, but this is basically how the world is now. Um, so this was a very good prediction, I think. You know, one thing that really bothers me. So in this, yeah, in the first image is about Yem is coming in between a baby and his own parents, because he's trying to get his name to be the baby's first word instead of mama or dada. So
Oh,
one
I see what you're saying. Say yem as opposed to mama.
right. So I mean, something that really disturbs me is when I go visit my sister, and she has 2 young children, and she has the Google Home or whatever in her house, you know. So they say, "Hey Google, make a timer or play music or something." But I mean, that thing is listening to everything that they say, and it's learning about their personalities, and it's figuring out how everybody is, and not just for figuring out what products they're going to be interested in. It's just figuring out their whole person, you know, and they're going to grow up with that, with this creature that knows everything about them, not because it likes them or because it wants them to, you know, grow up to be something good, you know. But anyway, that's what this story is about, and well, you can follow it. I pretty much got the whole story in there. This is all concept art, yeah, but there are two characters, two main characters, and one of them is sort of like the normal guy who buys into everything, and the other one is sort of like someone who figures out how things are actually working. He's someone uh, who is interested in understanding Yem's power. And well, so the one thing that Yem fears is competition. He is someone who can't have children because he genetically engineered himself.
Is he like a Unix?
Well, he's someone who desired immortality, you know, like one of these transhumanists.
Yeah, they used to
But
call them Unixes in the Bible, I think.
well, yeah, I guess so. But you know, if you want to be immortal, if you the logical conclusion is that you cannot have children. And the reason is that the evolutionary function of aging and death is that you can never keep up with the way that the world changes forever. You can only stay ahead for a certain amount of time before you become obsolete, because it's like you can innovate and change, but there are many more points of originality in the rest of the world than there are in you. So eventually you are not you can't keep up with all of that. So eventually you need to leave room for your children. But if you want to be immortal, you are put in a position of having to keep up with all the changes in the rest of the world, which is impossible forever. It's impossible after a certain point, but in the short term, you can try to control everything so that there's no originality other than what's coming out of you. And there's this zero-sum game in it, because anybody else who's in competition is very bad, because they're risking that you're risking your position if there's somebody else like that.
So now,
And
how does this all relate back to Bitcoin?
well, because Bitcoin is a system that repudiates immortality. So the rules are eternal, but the people who maintain the network are businesses that can go out of business. So it's just like capitalism itself. I mean, the thing that's really good about capitalism is that everything fails gracefully because there's redundancy, which is not what we have when we have one centralized system that controls everything. So, but what I've seen is that very few people understand this, and people will choose. Well, the reason people become slaves is they don't want to eliminate the possibility of being the master. Like, even if there's only going to be one of them, that's kind of why the Ring of Power is why the Ring of Power destroys people in the Lord of the Rings, and they still want it so badly. If you give up the Ring of Power, that's like saying, I'm never gonna be totally in control of everything. So people will prefer to play some kind of extremely dangerous zero-sum game because of the remote possibility of winning, over the chance to play a relatively safe game where everybody protects each other, because of having to give that up.
And what sort of zero-sum game are people playing right now?
Well, like if people want to be immortal, they have to kill all the other immortals. Or like if there's different blockchains, that's a zero-sum game. Or if there are different,
you mean lots of blockchains is a zero-sum game?
Yeah.
How?
Well, because they don't add value to each other. There's it's like having two different monies. You really you need one. It's better to have the best money is the one that everybody else uses, right? So if you've got competing monies, then you've got less value than you have if everybody just all uses the same one. So there's a network effect with one kind of money, and then so Metcalfe's law that says that the value of the network is the square of the number of participants, roughly speaking. So if that's true, then two equally sized networks would be half as valuable as one big network that included everybody, because then you take the total number and you square it, and you get the total value. That's a little bit of a hand-wavy kind of argument, but basically it's like that. It's zero sum because the maximum value is when there's just one that everybody uses.
Money. So like in our current world, like how do you see that playing out? Or how do you want it to play out?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, so yeah, so what I said was we should talk about my big mistakes. And
Yeah,
so,
your big mistakes. Exactly.
something I've always done, well, something I started out with when I got into Bitcoin was putting economics first. And what I believed is that people would want to strategize. Uh, in other words, people would want to understand the nature of the game that is being played and attempt uh, to create the optimal outcome. So, what I would have thought is that if we've got a zero sum game, that people would not want to play it. Like the people would not want the option to play a zero sum game because it's so bad for them. But uh, and economically, you would say that people who are hurting themselves will eventually lose out. But what I've seen is that people are not strategizing this way. The person who actually strategizes in the way that I was imagining is the Nietzschean Superman. So that's not, it's unusual. And so, I've spent a long time trying to understand the psychology of all of this because, to me, the natural way of doing things is to min max the game and to try to understand the game accurately and just figure out the best strategy of it. But I just don't think that there are, I don't see that as being very common. So, I
And
mean, my strategy has been based on imagining that other people were thinking the same way, but really they're not.
and that was by putting economics first. That was your mistake, your first mistake.
Yeah. So yeah, so what I've been trying to do is understand the psychology of all of this. Like how are people trying to think about this? And so basically, it works the way that I just explained. I mean, um,
The Nietzschean Superman.
yeah. So the Nietzschean Superman, he would be someone who would be strategizing based on the real nature of the game. But what Nietzsche would say is that most people are in this Dionysian, Apollonian dialectic, where they are uh, pursuing pursuing dreams. Basically, they,
Fantasies.
they they've got fantasies that they are unwilling to abandon,
Ah,
even at the
utopian fantasies.
well, it could be. I mean, Nietzsche was talking about religion, but yeah, the same idea could be applied to socialism. I don't know if he talked about that specifically, but I mean, it works out that way. I mean, um, uh, excuse me, but basically, there is some kind of uh, idea of perfection, and the real world is sort of a cost benefit, and nothing is absolutely good. Everything comes with costs, but there is this kind of psychologists call this splitting, and that means seeing the good and bad in one thing as if it's two different things, and not putting them together. So people are clinging to some kind of idea of some kind of maximum or perfect good, pure good, and if you try to tell them that there isn't something like that, then they go into nihilism, and
All right.
it's very weird. I mean, I think that if you're an economist, it's sort of natural just to think about things in terms of cost and benefit. So it really seems like some people just aren't really like that at all. But this Nietzsche theory does seem to apply to the majority of people. But the thing about, well, I mean, the thing about people who are in this kind of Apollonian Dionysian dialectic is if they won't give up on their fantasy, then really the only thing you can do with them is exploit them. And that's something that I always thought shouldn't be necessary, or isn't a good idea. But it seems like really the only people who are making money in this whole crypto market are the ones who are exploiting people, not the ones who are trying to achieve collective security.
Can you give an example of that? Like the ones that exploit people?
Well, like people who start new blockchains, that this has been going on forever. I mean, instead of trying to make Bitcoin better, people go off and start alternate systems. So there's this separation, like everybody gets cut up into tiny groups instead of one big group, which would be a lot better. And the reason people are willing to go along with it is because of the possibility of making it really big in one of these new blockchains. Or now it's more about new tokens, but it's about the possibility of winning big rather than having this collective security
So
that
how
we
do
could all
we,
make for themselves.
so what is the solution to that, Daniel?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've just been spending the last 10 years or so just trying to understand this psychology. I don't really know what to do about it at this point. But I guess, I guess I would say, like, if we could separate people into two groups. So one of them would be like the Nietzschean Superman who wants collective security. And then the other group would be the people who are in the Apollonian Dionysian dialectic. And this is what the Byzantine generals problem is all about, right? It's about the honest actors mutually figuring out who they all are. So if we could do that, then we could all work on exploiting the Apollonian Dionysian people together. Then we could all make lots of money.
No,
But I think we would have to conceal that we're involved in BSV if we were doing that.
well, I mean, this is going to sound basic to you, but what is the Byzantine generals problem?
The Byzantine generals problem is the problem of honest actors mutually identifying each other. So in other words, all honest actors know who all of the other honest actors are.
And that's one of the things Bitcoin solved?
Yes. That's the whole problem of politics. Yeah, none of the nations have solved that. None of the governments solved that problem. But yeah, Bitcoin is a solution to the Byzantine generals problem. So in the original paper, there were solutions to the Byzantine generals problem that were written out. It's not like there had never been any solutions before.
The white
But
paper?
no, in the original Byzantine generals paper.
Oh,
But the difference is that Bitcoin allows for entry and exit and re-entry. So other solutions to the Byzantine generals problem essentially require that the size of the network is fixed, and there is a fixed number of components. So I think you could say that conservatism is very much like one of these or earlier solutions to the Byzantine generals problem, because conservatives all want to keep out new people and they want to separate themselves from everybody else, and they want to say like the nation is supposed to work just for our group. And I think you could say that well, anyway, but Bitcoin isn't like that, because there isn't one group. The group is just whoever comes in. So Bitcoin is kind of like something where we have free immigration, and it's still supposed to work for whoever's there, and that's the big innovation of Bitcoin. well, there's one of them. I mean, it's quite an innovative idea, but that is something that's different about it. So, but, I think what we've seen is that we do have people who have an instinctive sense about the need for a solution to the Byzantine generals problem, but they're all conservatives. So they don't want something with free immigration. They don't understand the idea of Bitcoin. And then I think what we've seen is that most of the people who got into Bitcoin are not people who understood the need for a solution to the Byzantine generals problem at all.
And Daniel, before we go back to your mistakes here and go back through this, do you mind if we go to a question from Jack?
Yeah, great.
Okay, Jack, you're up, buddy.
Hey guys, honored to be on here. Can you hear me well?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I love how much more scientific and well-read Daniel is compared to me. But I'm someone who's followed his work since probably within the first month I got into Bitcoin. I don't really have a question, but I kind of want to share more of, I think, the psychology of what Daniel is speaking to. Can I do that?
Please, yeah,
Yeah.
Jack, go ahead.
So I'll make a random observation, and this may be true, this may not be true, but it's just a way to think about it. I think childless men are more likely to think about the well-being of the entire society and all human beings and blah, 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 and not play zero-sum games and things like BSV. I think once you have kids, or if your primary desire is to have kids, then you might feel like there might be a flaw in the incentives of human beings. So would you rather be among a world where everyone else that's not part of your genetics is doing very, very well? Or would you rather be like at a genetic level, Genghis Khan, and like half the world is your genetics? So this proneness to play zero-sum games is because you're playing zero-sum games with people who are not your genetics. So you want to think like we are all humans in one common species, but there might be some part of this which is like, I want to play zero-sum games if I can win these games against people that are not my genetics, and I'll play positive-sum games with only people of my genes. So I kind of observe that like all the fantasy, childlike, dreamlike hopes for the future come from a lot of people without children. And then the people with children are like, I don't give a fuck about this anymore. Whatever makes money, I'm going to make money. And I think that because there are different like IQ points in society, and I wouldn't even call it IQ in like the raw IQ sense, but it's just
Jack, you're cutting
whatever,
out. Go ahead, continue.
which used
Yeah, you're cutting out.
to be. Hello? Can you hear me?
Okay, go ahead. Yeah,
Oh, I'm cutting out?
you were. Yeah, now you're back.
Okay, how's now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. I was going to say that people at the top of a food chain, they want to play games with people at the bottom of the food chain who are unaware of things, because the tools and the technology to make them aware is not there yet historically. So you just keep on rugging them and just keep on rugging them in the kind of like abstract sense. Now, Krawisz is correct. To make the collective intelligence go up, despite your individual intelligence might be only at a 60 IQ or something, 80 IQ, 100 IQ, is there now because of things like proof of work, like hot locker, things like that, where you can give people a collective truth, a shared single brain, Bitcoin brain. That is there, yes. But until you use that and surpass the current way of doing things, even when a technology that exists that can facilitate this, like Bitcoin, comes out, you just start a brand new food chain attack between in zero-sum games between people at the top and people at the bottom. So like if I'm at the top, right, of a BTC world, do I rather scale it or keep it unscaled and then go play pump and dumps and then go create new blockchains and do whatever? Because the rest of humanity, they can only possibly see Web3 as like Web3 is Web2. It's just like same games on a blockchain. It's like same zero-sum games. And it's like venture capital versus venture capital in internet companies, venture capital in mobile companies. Now it's venture capital in blockchain companies. It's just like the way the rest of the world sees this technology is just like a different technology, right? It's like, oh, Wi-Fi. It's like, I don't know,
It's like
AI.
another web two is your point. Like it's like,
Exactly. And so they want to play the same playbook. Like get in early, sell high, like don't care about like growth of the network, this utopian type of thing. But like Krawisz just understood this like too early, and those of us who read Krawisz will understand it also. Yeah, his, I guess my childless point is actually the same point as his live forever point, that character he mentioned. So yeah, I think I'm not giving up on this concept, but there's some hurdles to overcome because there's some assumptions that might be more nuanced than we think.
all right. Thank you, Jack. Let's table back to
Can
you.
I add to
Daniel.
that?
Oh, who's that?
Satoshi,
Hey, buddy. Yeah, go ahead.
can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good, good. Yeah. Just to add on to what Jack and Daniel were saying, what they're missing out is the fact that the concepts that Daniel has been thinking about would play out if the market was neutral and there was only economic incentive in there. What people haven't seen, and what's kind of obvious to everybody now, is that there is a massive player in the market, and I mean a massive player that's been under the radar, whose sole aim and objective is to deceive everyone and everything about Bitcoin. That's the missing sort of like factor that you need to factor in to this equation, in the fact that people have purposely been deceived. If the market was to play out naturally, people would discover this. But because it's not playing out naturally and it's being manipulated in a way to purposely deceive people, these fantasies that people have are not fantasies. It's what they've been told. It's a deception that's been drummed into them. That's literally all it is. And also there's been no one there to correct them, because Craig couldn't come out and say, by the way, I am Satoshi Nakamoto, until he had the Tulip Trust safely back in his possession and Bitcoin had undergone this period of neutral size and organic growth that was scheduled to finish on the 1st of January 2020. So this entity that has been, the sole purpose is to deceive people, has had 10 years of deceiving people. And then, as Mark Twain said, it's easier to fool someone than it is to convince them that they've been fooled. And that's what we're dealing with.
Sounds like Yem, Daniel. You mentioned Yem, and seems like that was the name for what, is that the name for what the thing that Satoshi was talking about?
That's my name for him. Yeah, sure. And yeah, Yem is like the alternative to Bitcoin, which is a hub and spokes network whose goal is to know everybody and be a unique entity in the universe. So kind of like Highlander, in the sense that they all have to kill each other, but not in the sense of knowing everybody. And I think that this kind of has to do with how these AI guys are all saying like, we're going to create God, we're going to create a new God into existence with AI and all that stuff. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. If they have overwhelming intelligence and the ability to know everybody and be everybody's friend, then that allows them to exploit everybody. And that's really what this game that is being played outside of Bitcoin is all about. And as to Jack's point, so first of all, thanks a lot for joining us. And yeah, I think Jack has been ahead of me on psychology for a while now. But I would say, excuse me, I would say if we're talking about people who, so what I was saying that someone who desired immortality would have to eliminate children in order to be consistent. Would have to not have children. You would have to give up on children in order to be consistent with that. But you could also say that someone who was not having children, or someone who was castrated, or someone who just was giving up on children for any reason, would also be drawn to this quest for immortality, because that would be an alternative. And I see man as a creature that is sort of at odds with himself in a way, and I see the intelligence of man as being something that is like something that's always trying to escape, like trying to get out of the physical body, and I think that has to do with this. That's kind of like these transhumanists, but I just don't think they know where they're going when they try to do that. I mean, ultimately, a set of disembodied intelligences ends up in a contest to destroy each other. But if we have people who are animals with physical bodies and who reproduce, then they have a much greater possibility of living in peace with one another.
And Daniel, what back to some of your greatest mistakes? I mean, you mentioned that putting economics first was one. What else can people learn from your lessons and mistakes that you made?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you about some books I think you should read. So first of all, I think everybody should take a break to just try to understand Austrian economics. I mean, I've been saying that ever since I got into Bitcoin, and people haven't done that. But so if you want to learn that, you should read Menger, Bovark, Mises, and Rothbard. And then my favorite modern Austrian is Jesus Huerta de Soto. And as for psychology, the most useful sources, I think, have been Nietzsche and the modern ideas of narcissism. So there's a book called Narcissism Revisited by Sam Vaknin. And Nietzsche's idea is very similar to narcissism. And narcissism is like a guy whose whole existence is a kind of fantasy. Nietzsche's theory is more about why do people believe one particular fantasy. But I think they work together, and I think this psychological theory explains a lot about why people resist economics so much, and why people say economics is the dismal science, which is not something I ever saw. To me, like, economics is something that tells us real information about how to make a better society. And it does say that these utopian schemes aren't going to work very well, but is that really so horrible? I mean, if we can make things better from where they are now, isn't that really good? To me, economics has never been the dismal science. But and speaking of children and DNA, there's an important book by Dawkins called The Extended Phenotype, which is a sequel to The Selfish Gene. You should read both of those. But this is what Jack was talking about is called kinship altruism. So it's not just children, but also other family members. So on average, you share 20% of your genetic variation with your parents, or 50%. Sorry, 50% with your parents, and 50% with your siblings, and then 25% with your nieces and nephews, and 50% with your own children. So if you have a brother or sister who has 2 children, that is as good as if you had 1 children on average, because
Oh,
not all siblings share exactly 50%. It's random, but on average, siblings share 50% of the genetic variation. But I think that the Austrian theory of money shows that people who use the same money are in a relationship to one another that is very much like siblings in genetically, because the value of the money is going to go up when other participants of the network grow individually. So it puts us in this situation where we all benefit from everybody else's individual growth. And certainly, as to his point that people with children don't think about this kind of stuff. I mean, certainly once you have children, then you're in a need to spend a lot more money in the short term, and that's certainly something that I've been thinking about myself recently. So, but I would say that
and
it's not that.
Daniel's going to have a baby, it sounds like, or so congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to have my first baby in September. That's projected, of course. It doesn't have to work exactly like that, but I would say that the fact that it's not that having children makes you stop thinking about it. It's not like having children makes you jaded on big ideals. I think that it just makes you. It just requires you to be more short term in a certain way, because you have these children that you got to feed, and you got to get that money consistently in order to get all that stuff that they need.
Are there any other mistakes that you can share that people can learn from?
Okay, well, I told you about psychology. So and I told you about Richard Dawkins. So another book I would really recommend is The Rational Mehl by Rollo Tomasi. Actually, that's very relevant because that's got all of this this stuff about nihilism right in it, because it's similar kind of idea. Like, people have this ideal about women, and then when they learn about the evolutionary strategy of women, they can get really depressed about it, which does seem kind of odd to me, because are you really surprised that somebody would try to maximize their own value? It's kind of like on the one hand, it seems like it's something that is kind of quite obvious, and on the other hand, people do seem to experience a whole lot of psychological distress about it. And there's another book that I read recently that was really interesting. This is kind of a different topic, but it's called Biohistory by Jim Penman. And well, that's about biology too, but it's about natural cycles and about evolutionary strategies that are observed in animals, and attempts to explain the cycle of history in terms of these observations of animals. And it's really the only thing that I've seen that explains the cycle of civilization that seems like it actually makes sense to me. It is a speculative idea, so not saying it's necessarily true, but I haven't really seen any other theories that seem like they make a lot of sense to me.
So, and how does this relate back to?
I have a question about evil ideas, Daniel. Sorry to cut you off, Gavin.
Who's this?
This is Nicholas Orion. We have
Nicholas? Okay.
yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, Daniel.
And
You want to take a
so
question?
Daniel, I got a question about evil ideas. So at one point, I remember you saying that one of the ways conventional ideas stay alive is by telling you that the opposite is evil. And anything people call evil is an overlooked source of good ideas. And so my question is, in these comic strips that, or I don't know what else to call them, if that's what you're calling them, what is the most evil idea?
Yeah, the most evil idea is to understand how Yem functions. To say it's the most evil idea is to empathize with Yem, because then you can start to think about like, how would I become like him? And that's what he doesn't want. That's what he wants less than anything. So he wants you to think that he's just like you. That's why he says that. That's why he says these things. He's like, we're so similar to one another, even though that's completely absurd. So everybody thinks that he's like a similar kind of person to them.
Oh,
When
he
really
thinks
he's
like a regular person. That's the
when really he's a super intelligence who can imitate everybody.
Really quick, Daniel, is there like an etymology with the name Yem going on?
Yeah, well, you need to watch. There's a Futurama episode called "The Beast with a Billion Backs," and I totally lifted
yeah, that's a
Yem
good one.
out of that episode. And I forgot what his name was, but he does have kind of a similar name in that episode. So it is a little embarrassing. I like the thing is in that episode they did not take this idea anywhere near as far as I thought they could. So I don't feel too bad about lifting the idea because I took it a lot farther. In the Futurama episode, the creature is called Yivo, and he's sort of like a satire of religion. But I don't know. It just seems like this idea of the creature that can literally talk to everybody. He's like God, except he's physically real. So he has a physical connection to this central hub somewhere with these like snakes, these tentacles that talk to everybody. I mean, I just thought that was so wild. But anyway, that's where he comes from. But actually, I think my version is a lot better. I mean, I thought that was kind of when the Futurama series was kind of at a low point, and it really wasn't all that funny for a while. So basically, that's what happened.
Nice. So if anybody has anything else to add, feel free to raise your hand or jump up here. I'd love to hear what if Zach's on, if he's with us, he hasn't had a chance to say anything yet. So I'd love to hear from you, Zach, if you're available to talk, see if you had anything to add.
I have questions, but they're kind of off topic, so I feel like it's not really additive to what's going on now, but I appreciate the chance, and I will raise my hand when I feel like it's time to diverge.
Okay. All right, cool. Thanks, Zach. What about you, Brett? You were inspired me to help get this together. So what's on your mind?
Hey, everyone. Is my audio okay, or is it a little low?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Sounds
it's
good.
very crisp.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me on. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing. I wanted to add a couple points. Number one, if you're interested in learning more about Yem, we organized a session with Daniel 4 years ago, and he gave a 2-hour lecture on Yem. He went through the entire conceptual art. He explained it really in depth. I posted that as a comment underneath this Spaces, I believe, or underneath the comment from Gavin about don't miss the space. So look for that, or maybe Mehl, if you can post that in the nest. There's also a little bit more content from Daniel, video called The Beacon, the Bunker, and the Faulty Node. He explains really well how we're talking about a technological development in the concept of the solution to the Byzantine generals problem, but that beyond being just simply a technological solution, it actually represents a sociological solution in the formation of the social contract, where we are moving from the state of nature, which is kind of very implicitly a dog-eat-dog world to a shared social network where we have shared values. And Daniel explores a lot of that from both a philosophical and a technical perspective that I find very valuable. And then the last piece that I wanted to add is just as I'm listening to Daniel here, one of the things that I'm struck with is this concept of, I don't know why that I'm being drawn to this idea, but this concept of like a superbug or something like that, like something that can be put into a society or can be put into kind of like a social group that destroys the individuals. Okay, so if we just think of it from like the perspective of an actual disease or something like that, when you think of that type of thing, you always hear this concept that it's easier to destroy than to create. So if we have this concept of like a superbug, a disease, my mind immediately goes to something like cancer. Fortunately, my father passed away from cancer just a couple months ago, so that's on my mind. The concept of cancer is that it's growing and it thinks that the body is the outside world. It doesn't understand that it hasn't been brought into relationship and harmony with the rest of the body, so it doesn't understand that it's attacking itself. And so if we just extrapolate that into not just a physical disease, but also a concept of destruction from within by separation from the natural order harmony that actually creates this social contract that Daniel talks about. And then if we just think of what is the opposite of that, what is the contrast to that, so we can understand something that would be trying to rip the body apart from within and break it down. But what is the flip side? What is like the opposite of a super bug, like a super harmony or a super health? And one of the things is that Daniel talks about this in The Beacon, the Bunker, and the Faulty Node, is that one of the reasons why there's not such a thing as like a super health or something like that is because information is always changing. So if there was like the equivalent of a bug that while the bug broke things down, this built things up, then in a way it actually defeats its own purpose, because that's what cancer does. Cancer builds itself up, but it does so without accurate information about what's going on around it, to the degree where it actually defeats its own purpose, because it eats itself out from within. So the equivalent, the natural equivalent or the harmonic equivalent would just be a pure flow, a pure stream where information, reliable information could be all the time accurately gauged and developed. And so it doesn't have a form. It is essentially, like Bruce Lee talks about, like be like water. It is formlessness, where the water, when you put it in a vase, it takes the shape of a vase. When you put it in a bathtub, it takes the shape of the bathtub, right? And so, but at the same time, it naturally lacks a definition, or it's not something that you can give to someone, right? Like, because it has this, it's just a clear channel where information can be reliably exchanged. And because of the fact, this is what Daniel's talking about when he's talking about building a greater network, that Bitcoin, it becomes a better network, it becomes a more reliable communication channel when more and more agents are on it and are able to actively engage and exchange this information. So but naturally, at the same time, because it lacks any true substance of its own, otherwise it would sort of be self-defeating. It has to be just an empty void where information can come through and be ascertained. Then it also becomes somewhat vulnerable to manipulation, because people get to say, oh, what do you mean Bitcoin, or what do you mean that network this is the network where the reliable information is coming in. And so its substancelessness, which is its benefit, also becomes a way where people who aren't engaged and don't understand this stuff at this level, they really lose the ability to draw a distinction between, well, why is that information more valuable? Why can't this be the network where the valuable information is?
Sounds like it's also a vulnerability at the same time. And so Well, I don't know. How do we overcome that, Daniel? If you want to chime in, and also we got BSV Panama's got his hand up next as well. So,
Okay, well, yeah. First of all, Brett, that was wild. Yeah, it's like the Tao. I don't. You didn't say that, but that sounds just like what you were describing. And yeah, you can think of cancer as being like a reversion to an earlier state prior. That was before eusociality, which is eusocial. That's like ants or bees. But you can think of every multicellular life form as being individual cells that are eusocial, just like an ant colony. And excuse me, and the cancer is like one of those like a group of ants that starts to go rogue, and they don't, but eventually they're gonna kill themselves with it, because it's only the queen and it's only the queen that can reproduce. So yeah, so well, I would say the vulnerability comes from well, I think it comes from people's natural psychology, because if something is, I mean, if it's like water, if it's like something that reshapes itself to fit any void, in order to make it really work that way, we need people who are looking into different ideas and who are not trapped into some kind of set way of thinking. But what we've seen is that really most people are not very good at looking into different ideas. I just saw I wish I could find it, but there was a psychologist who investigated on how people respond to authority, and he found that 80% of people would obey authority, no matter how illegitimate the order. But now I can't quite remember. Was that the Millikan experiment or something? Anyway, that's how most people are like. So if you're not like that, that's who we really need to make Bitcoin work.
so to compliment on Brett's response there, there's a post underneath this space with a couple videos that Daniel shot that is in the that Brett had replied to, so that he recommended everyone take a look at. So can we go over to BSV Panama? He's got his hand up.
Hi, good evening, good afternoon, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for the opportunity. I have a comment because I would like to know who else picked up on the very important contribution just a few minutes ago from Satoshi in the system, because the whole situation is a system with many components, and what he was talking about is a very important component of this whole system, because theories and generalizations, categorizations, all kinds of opinions are very, very interesting to talk about, and they sure contribute to a better understanding of things, but they also can be misleading at times, and they tend to shatter in front of actual and factual reality. So I'd like to ask Satoshi if he would like to elaborate a little bit more and longer about his contribution, because I think it's very important. Thank you.
Satoshi? Satoshi's never shy on words, so maybe he's not hearing us right now. I did.
Oh yes. I was
okay,
I was
you
there.
are.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, just had my my earphones fell out. Yeah, so you wanted me to elaborate on what I was saying?
Sounds like you were talking about the
Please.
Yem character, but you were making it in different, in different terminology.
Well, I mean, it's just
right?
the
BSV
religious.
Panama, what was the main point?
Yeah, do you want to ask that question again?
Yeah, do you mind repeating the question? And I'm going to add.
Well, the question is, that, well, it's a request for elaboration on the very important point that perspective that Satoshi was talking about, because in the whole system of what we are talking about, with all the different theories and generalizations and categorizations and opinions, we often find that although these opinions and theories might be very interesting for a deeper understanding of something, they usually tend to be to shatter themselves in front of actual and factual reality. So something is happening, and Satoshi was pointing it out. And this is very important. And I would like to know who else picked up on that. And since it doesn't seem that anyone picked up on that, maybe Satoshi can elaborate on it, please, to make it more understood. Thank you.
Yeah, I can do that. Can you all hear me all right?
Yeah, we got you, buddy.
Yeah. So there is a concerted, well, I mean, JFK actually mentioned this in his president and the press speech in I think it was 1961.
Yeah.
You know, where he said, you know, we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means, you know, on infiltration instead of invasion, you know, on subversion instead of election, blah 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 blah. So you have a centralized entity that is determined to keep centralized control of everything that they've got, which includes the financial system. They completely control that, and then when you have control of the financial system, because you know, Henry Kissinger said, "Who controls money controls the world." If you control the financial system, you can then control the movement and direction of markets in the direction that you want them to go, because you are economically funding that. Yeah, but obviously the medium of exchange that we're using is completely false. It's securities fraud. So they can print as much as they want in order to create a market that they want to emerge, rather than a market that is naturally occurring. And if people were to start using Bitcoin, you know, we as a people would develop markets that would benefit our lives and every single individual on this planet. And that would be along the lines of free energy, zero, emission cars, like, cars that run on water, hydrogen, which, H2O and all that kind of stuff. But anyone and everyone that's created those systems, like cars that run on water, free energy from the ether, or from magnetism, all that kind of stuff, they've been taken out. They've been bumped off. And it's literally what the entity that's behind this tries to keep themselves in the shadows. And the way they do that is by using third parties and controlling the markets. And so what they were doing to try and get rid of Bitcoin was pumping and dumping it. And because Craig couldn't come out and say, "Oh, I'm Satoshi Nakamoto, this is what Bitcoin is for," they had an opportunity to come in and spin the narrative and change it from even what it says on the white paper, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, into digital gold, store of value, not many use it, all this crap. And then when people are just like, "Oh, right, yeah, so you're meant to hodl, you're not meant to use it," and number just goes up. Well, these people can magically make number go up when they're just printing copious amounts of this medium of exchange, which is Tether. So that distracts people away from the utility of Bitcoin and the demand that it's actually meant to generate in the market for its usefulness.
Brilliant.
That's all that's happening.
Usefulness. I got it. Yeah. So it's distracting people from the usefulness of Bitcoin. I added, Casey had mentioned that old Craig was somebody that we should talk to. So I sent you a request, Craig, if you want to come up. Casey, I requested you come back up as well if you're able to. So who else has their, Zach, perfect timing. Go over to you, buddy. Got your hand up.
Yeah, cool. So it feels like this might be additive now. Daniel and then Satoshi also just recently, in the last comment, but Daniel early on started describing how Satoshi spoke in his early days, as early Satoshi, and then switched to describing Satoshi as Craig and talking about some later things. Now, Daniel, I know you said that you started writing in around 2014 with the Nakamoto Institute, but my question to you right now for this, my first question actually is, what was your first experience with Craig as a person? Not the pseudonym Satoshi, but with Craig as a person.
Yeah, my first one was at that conference in 2015, where he showed that blanking on his name. One of those cypherpunk guys. He said that
Was this
Bitcoin was Turing complete.
Bitcoin Bell, that one?
Yeah.
Bitcoin. You were there?
Yeah. I was a speaker at that conference.
No way.
Yeah. So
that was
he was on the
Bitcoin.
stage with like Szabo.
Yeah, Nick Szabo, that was the one. Yeah. So he basically said that.
And Joseph von Perling as well.
Yeah, he said that. Well, yeah, something interesting about that. Now I don't remember if this happened before or after, but I actually got to have a conversation with Nick Szabo, and I had read some of his stuff. But when I actually talked to him, I was thinking like, this guy is an idiot. Similar to what Craig might have been thinking when he was talking to him, but like he kind of, I had a little discussion with him too, where I didn't think it seemed like he didn't really know what he was talking about at all to me. And he was saying that we don't need a fixed supply of money. So he was saying that there's these theories where people are saying that they're going to start increasing the supply of BTC in order to make it work. And so, as far as he's concerned, there isn't anything wrong with that. I can tell you from having spoken to him. And anyway, for Craig, yeah, I remember Bitcoin Bell was saying, she said something like, maybe you guys, if you don't know who he is, I don't, something like that. So I was saying like, so I was thinking, okay, so she thinks he is somebody. Could he be Satoshi? And while I was listening to him, I was thinking he could be Satoshi, but probably not, because what I was imagining is that there would be lots of people like him who are sort of in the sidelines and who are not prominent, because really it's a lot smarter not to try to become prominent and just to try to be an entrepreneur on Bitcoin. So I had this idea that there would be lots of really intelligent people who would be a lot better than the ones who are most prominent and invisible, which turned out not really to be true. But anyway, I could see that the Craig Wright was very important, because one of the first things he said was, I try to stay on the sidelines. Like he was kind of embarrassed about showing up in this video. He didn't want to be famous. So just from that, I was like, oh, well, this guy is a lot smarter than most of the people at this conference. Yeah, I remember I was very interested in what he said, and I really appreciated the talk, and I was very interested in him as a person. But ultimately, my expectations were too high for the Bitcoin network. I was vastly overestimating the intelligence of the network. So
and
that's
Zach, it seems like there's a reason for asking that question.
Yeah, well, it leads so I think a lot of people look up to Daniel's ability to synthesize information, right? He's clearly very smart, clearly very, very well read, and well reasoned in almost everything that he's just described. For, I don't know, how long have we been on here? An hour and a half, 90 minutes. So for me, there are just a couple of discrepancies from a time in Bitcoin's history that like I wasn't a part of, that he was a part of. And so my next question kind of relates back to BitDNS. you described early Satoshi as wanting something like BitDNS to be on a second layer or a different blockchain, even entirely, maybe that, hashed back to Bitcoin, and later became like a real big blocker. So my question to you is like, how did you become a big blocker in this space? And can you talk about your journey in like rationalizing going from, small blocks are good for security or whatever the main reason is, to where you stand today, which is big blocks are the most economically viable?
Well, I was never for
At least
small
that's what I
blocks.
think you are.
No, I've never moved to small or big blocks. I was always for big blocks. I thought small blocks was just completely stupid. I never even wrote anything against them because I thought the idea was so dumb. I was like, what are these people talking about? But this argument, big blocks versus small, I mean, it's something that libertarians have seen before. And it has to do with this idea of the perfect competition. And so there is this argument in mainstream economics that says that the free market theory doesn't work unless there's a large number of very small firms, and this is really bad for free markets because, in real life, what we see is a few large firms that dominate pretty much any industry, and then many small firms that are sort of in the sidelines that are just waiting for an opportunity if one of the big ones fails. And libertarians have long argued that the free market works fine and that a few large firms that dominate most of the industry is fine. And for the same reason that Satoshi, or I mean that Craig Wright says that that the BSV is decentralized. It's because it has free entry, and it's because any one of these large firms will go out of business if they don't try to please customers, and they'll be replaced by somebody else. And we've seen that companies can be quite bad for a long time, but eventually they do go out of business. I mean, one thing that's I've been following now just because I find it so entertaining is this story of the Disney company, where they've been trying to to insult all of the Disney customers and the fans of all of the series that they've acquired, and
Star Wars.
and make terrible versions of them. Yeah, Star Wars is what people are talking
They're
about now.
blaming the fans for the
Yeah, and it is so dumb, but I mean, the free market is a decentralized system because it's capitalist, because anybody can start a new business, and right now, because of Disney, there's a lot of opportunity, and nobody has replaced Disney yet. But if they don't really put their act together very, very soon and very, very rapidly, they're going to get replaced by somebody quite easily. I mean, John Lasseter now has a new job, so he's doing something else. I don't remember what that is, but he's very, very good. And there's also people who could just come out of nowhere who are unknown right now. So to me, this argument about big blocks and small blocks, that's something that we've been seeing for a very long time. And I was very blindsided by this because I thought that the Bitcoiners, who were mostly libertarians, would be familiar with it and would understand it. And of course, also, I would also say that big blocks, small blocks, that they have to do with the problem of socialism discussed by Ludwig von Mises, because small blocks eliminates profits and losses, because you can't buy BTC to make or spend. You can't spend BTC to make BTC right now. So there's no profit and losses, which means we have the problem of socialism on BTC. But what I saw is that libertarians only understood. I saw the libertarians have never understood Ludwig von Mises, and they only understand socialism in terms of coercion versus voluntarism, And so they don't have an idea that you can have the problem of socialism without an authoritarian government. But I mean, in BTC, everybody voluntarily stays in, and they destroy their economy and all potential for a market. So,
All right.
anyway, that's how I saw the big block, small
Nice.
block debate.
And before we go to Craig Mason, back to you, Zach. Did you want to add anything else to that and reply?
Well, I did have one more question, but I just want to throw out there. So I understand, Daniel, what you just said about capitalism versus socialism in theory. But if we take what's actually happening today as a snapshot, and I'm not saying that I've well thought this or this is well reasoned by any means, right? This is just gut listening to what you said. The idea that we have a basically subsidized mining system on BSV and a flat rate of 1 Satoshi per kilobyte, because the biggest miner is willing to accept that, other miners have not yet found a niche to be able to charge a premium in order to get information into an infinite block space. So the buyers are buying the commoditized version at 1 sat per kilobyte, and the network is sort of being subsidized by miners who believe the coin will appreciate in value, whereas BTC today has an actual fee, like an actual capitalist fee market, where people are bidding more Satoshis in order to have their transaction included in the blockchain. Am I wrong about thinking about it that way? As you know, the subsidized 1 sat per KB being more socialist than the capitalist fee market.
It seems like, Zach, are you mentioning
applied by replaced by fee today?
So Zach, is it the one like the BSV Association or N-Chain being the big miner, or Tal, I guess? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, it's Tal.
Okay, Tal, yeah. Go ahead, Daniel.
Tal, right? So like,
oh yeah, please, Zach.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, I've never thought of it that way, but no, I mean, I don't think that BSV is more socialist than BTC, but definitely the point of subsidizing the fee market, subsidizing transaction processing, is to continue to dominate the network. And you know, offhand, that seems like kind of a bad idea, because the whole, you know, it's kind of goes against this whole collective security thing. So if you're saying like I want to keep controlling 50% of the blocks that get mined, and we're going to make it so that it's less profitable for other people to try to join in and process transactions. It seems like that would, you would have to say that would slow down development of BSV. And so, and the reason you would want to do that is because you want to dominate rather than to do collective security. So yeah, I mean, I would say that people who are getting into BSV with the idea that it's going to be a big network in the future would naturally want to accept lower prices for transaction processing. So they'd be willing to do it at a lower profitability. So is it necessarily bad that Tal is dominating the market by subsidizing transaction processing? Well, I mean, I think there's cost and benefits to it, so I can't really say for certain. But yeah, I mean, it would be pretty great if there were more miners getting in with the idea to try to generate more revenue via transactions. I mean, it doesn't really make, yeah, I mean, it doesn't, if you can't see how you would generate fee revenue by developing products for BSV, then it doesn't really make that much sense to develop products. It would be a lot better if there were if the more people developing products that lead to transactions being created that's better for the growth of the network. But the only way they're really going to be interested in that is if they're going to be earning that revenue from transaction processing.
Nice. And all right, well, are you satisfied, Zach?
Yeah.
Okay.
One last question though.
Yeah.
One last question though.
Please.
Is there, in your opinion, is there any chance that there's a value for having, so let me preface it with this. Essentially a BSV transaction can be any size. You could split it across blocks or whatever, right? It could essentially be any size. And on a BTC transaction, you're limited to about 80 bytes in what you can, in the data you can attach to that transaction, aside from ordinals and witness data, just, talking straight op return. Is there a value, and I'm asking this just, philosophically for my business as well. Is there a value in a whole lot more transactions that really only fill 80 bytes or less because they're hashing data instead of writing the raw data in bytes to the chain?
Well, yeah, there was an earlier idea that was kind of like that. Now I can't remember what it was called, but there was a service where you would register things with them, and then they would make a Merkle tree, and they would just put that in the BTC blockchain like once a day or something like that. I can't remember what it was called, but if you're in, there isn't. I mean, the difference is, can you register the timing of events in very small increments, or is it good enough to have a once per day or once per hour? Because since you can create Merkle trees, you can establish the existence of a document or many documents at a certain time with a single hash. And so if once per day is good enough for you, and of course you can also collectivize it, so you can do many people together, like this other thing I'm thinking of, his name I forgot. So you can you don't need a lot of block space if you're working together to make Merkle trees. I guess that would just depend on your application.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to take that as a yes. Thank you.
I think it is a yes. All right, great. Okay, let's go over to Craig Mason. You're on the stage, my man. Welcome. Anything to add or comments or questions for Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I only got in here pretty recently, but I'm enjoying the discussion. I'm not, I'm not unplugged from Bitcoin. I can't remove myself from Bitcoin. It's all very interesting, and everyone is, kind of down bad lately. The price is obviously down. But we're all still here. People are building cool stuff. And I saw Kurt Booker Jr. tweeted something yesterday, something to the effect of, I just really like Bitcoin. And that really resonated with me, because regardless of what's going on in my life or what's going on in the news, I can't myself away from Bitcoin, specifically Bitcoin SV, of course. But it just takes up a lot of space in my head, and it's endlessly interesting. There's endless things you can do with it, obviously. But I guess specifically, Daniel, I'd be curious to hear your comment on this. So, I've been reading, just started that Roger Ver book, Hijacking Bitcoin, and he goes through the history of what happened, and the block size wars, the Bitcoin Civil War, and how there was obviously the takeover by, like you were saying, Daniel, people they're kind of idiots, the way they think about this, to put it bluntly. But he talks about in that book that in when Bitcoin came out in 2010, and even through 2014, 2015, 2016, it was kind of novel that you could show people a Bitcoin wallet and then have them send money instantly, any amount across the world, for essentially no fee, or less than a penny fee. That was novel at the time. And it's between when they took over Bitcoin and made it BTC and kept the block size and made it unusable, for that kind of transaction. And now there's been prevalence of apps like Venmo and Zelle and Cash App and these things that have that same ability, although of course obviously doesn't solve the problem Bitcoin solves of having no intermediary. But you see the same thing. It in people's minds, it's kind of the same thing. You know, like if you were to explain to a person, "Oh, don't use Venmo. It's not on chain. You have to trust Venmo." They're just going to think, "Okay, you're a weirdo. Why would I care?" And I think you see the same thing happening now, or you've been seeing it for a long time happening now, but especially recently with more, so-called level 2 solutions. Like, I'm sure a lot of you have played the Champions TCG game, and on, they have cards on BSV that are on chain, ordinals, you can send them really easily. But also, they're agnostic to whatever chain they can get people to play on, and they've recently been launched on Immutable, IMX, which is on Ethereum, and you can send and receive cards on there on level 2 for no fees. And I'm pretty sure it's just like glorified AWS second layer, but nobody cares because it's still, it's cool because it's tied to the blockchain and you can have your cards and trade your cards and buy and sell your cards and all this. But what I'm wondering is what's going to make, because that's so much more prevalent. People, the IMX token is like 30 spots ahead on CoinMarketCap of all of BSV. And that's online gaming from like a layer 2, essentially, assuming I'm understanding this right, Ethereum token. Ethereum's is not as useful and scalable as BSV, and it's number 2 token of all the tokens. So what is going to make people, what's going to make people want to go back to something on chain? I'm not saying there's not anything. I'm just curious. I've been thinking about this a lot and thinking, what will actually make people shift to that? Is it some kind of catastrophic happening? Because right now they don't really care. And I'm not saying I think they should. Obviously, people here understand why. But what's going to be built or what's going to happen? I mean, we can't predict the future, but I don't know. I have so much belief in Bitcoin as a system, and I'm not pessimistic at all. I'm just thinking, this is going to be a very, very long run venture, and I don't know where it goes. Maybe I'm asking you to predict the future and you don't know, but curious to hear any thoughts you have, Daniel or anyone else, on what's going to make people want to do things on chain when they can do things for free otherwise. Any thoughts?
All right.
Yeah,
Daniel.
I don't know. That's a really good question. And yeah, I think back to those days that you were talking about when just sending the payment was unusual. Yes, it's such a huge opportunity that was just lost. That was just destroyed, and people just went along with it, and they were like, Bitcoin isn't for buying coffee. I mean, God, we're so dumb. I mean, it's like suicidal. I don't know, but anyway, like I think that Craig Wright's idea that Bitcoin is going to be like plumbing, is really the only thing that is going to work at this point, because, as you said, normal people just don't care about whether it's on chain or not, and that's just like how people don't know the difference between coins that are on an exchange and actually making a real Bitcoin transaction. I mean, to them, that's why BTC just works fine, because they're just trading on an exchange. And, there's always that risk that the exchange is going to disappear one day and all of the money will be gone, which will happen to every exchange eventually, sooner or later. But it's just too long term. From day to day, it's just too remote of a possibility for them to care about. And but if you are some kind of a big company and you're actually concerned about saving costs in a really detailed way, down to quite small amounts of money, then the potential applications of Bitcoin for that, I mean, that's something that you might really want to think about. I mean, there is a really big problem with maintaining databases. It's sort of it's going to be easier for a lot of these data companies to just kind of cooperate to work on one database. Of course, that's quite a paradigm shift. But if you can prove that collective security saves costs somewhere, then you have a product that you can sell, you know?
So back to you, Craig. Seems like there was a reason for asking that.
Well, my reason is thinking, you know, like, so do you have an example or maybe I don't really understand. So where's the cost savings for a company? Because from what I understand, it's like, is it just with so much volume, eventually you can't scale on these level 2 platforms? Or is it with Bitcoin, it allows for so many more transactions so much more efficiently? So maybe a company says, oh, well, we can run our business now for this cost on Amazon, but we could add all these new features and do way more transactions on Bitcoin. Is that why? I'm just trying to figure out like where it comes in that people actually care about this. And the business aspect makes sense.
I think you'd have to ask Craig Wright about that, because he's the one who's been actually working on this. But yeah, very good question. Because of course what I've been working on is trying to get individual people involved, based on this collective security idea. But I've just found that it's just not a really big motivator for people. I've just I've never really had very much success on getting new people involved. I mean, yeah, to me, Bitcoin is like such a great thing to think that there's a reason for other people over the internet to actually care about me, but I don't know. It seems like that's not what a lot of people are concerned with.
Well, Daniel, let me go on over. Unless there's anything else from you, Craig, we'll go over to Jacob next. So, Craig, Mason, anything else?
No, that's great. Thank you. Thanks
Nice.
for having
Okay,
me on.
Jacob,
Thanks,
you got your hand up, buddy. Go ahead. Jacob, going once. Looks like we got Crypto Spartacus on the stage as well. Did you want to add anything here?
Just a second, may I interrupt here?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Gavin,
Yes.
I just wanted to ask if you could maybe add Casey again, because she somehow fell down.
Okay, I'll add her again. And
Okay.
who else do we have on stage that's hasn't had a? Oh no, he's off the stage. Jacob,
Gavin, I can answer Craig's question for him if he wants.
Yeah, please, Satoshi.
Yeah. So the whole point of Bitcoin is that it secures people's data. It's the only network that doesn't have any central point of failure or control. That's the whole point. You either have a network that is centrally controlled, and therefore somebody controls your data and they sell your data, to make money, or you have an economically incentivized system which creates an economic advantage, which is what Bitcoin is all about. People and without competition, you simply get collusion and centralization. It's like Klaus Schwab's stakeholder capitalism all over again. The whole is having a network where you own and control your own data. And you can only do that on a network that is globally distributed and economically competitive. And if you want to secure your own data, well, all you do is you create your own node and you plug it into the network. And therefore, your node ensures that that protocol is going to continue. And if anybody creates an alternative protocol, well, you're still going to be continuing the one that your data is on. So, and going back to what the question that Zach was saying about.
System is reconnecting momentarily.
The others realize they've made a mistake and they're just like, oh shit, we've been mining this useless piece of garbage for like, 3, 4, 5 years now, and Calvin's rubbing his hands together. Well, yeah, I've been subsidizing the transactions, making sure the profitability was right down. I've maybe been, mining at a loss, but look at me now, because the huge amounts of utility is coming on the network. So that's what's going on at the moment.
Nice. That was to respond to Craig Mason, I believe, right, Satoshi?
Yeah, Craig and Zach.
Craig and Zach. Okay, nice. And we didn't hear from Jacob. He's removed his hand. So let's go over to Sparks. Is it Sparks? Oh, Jacob, did you have something?
Oh, sorry. Well, I was kind of forwarding something from Michael.
Okay,
was
yeah.
curious about what Daniel thought about the NAR and the DAR, which
Oh, good question. Yeah, that was a hot topic recently.
Yeah, so that's the network access rules effectively.
Let me just you're
because it's-
cutting in and out. So let me just finish it sounds like what you're asking. Daniel, he's asking you about the network access rules and the DAR from that we had a space on this the other day. So did you want to make any comments? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I don't know what DAR is. I know NAR.
Digital asset recovery.
So are those two different things? I mean,
It's two different things under the same umbrella. Yeah, there's network access rules and then digital access asset recovery.
well, yeah, I'm still confused about how the NAR is legal at all, because when I talk to I'm blanking on his name again, the Bitcoin guy, whatever.
Connor?
I talked to
Connor,
yeah, I talked to him about it, and he couldn't explain how the Bitcoin Association becomes a party to the contract, and the other guy, I forgot his name too, but he told him he's not allowed to talk about it. So I didn't get the answer to that. But as a practical matter, it does seem like there need to be rules for how the network is supposed to be used, because a big point of making Bitcoin useful is that it can't have any downtime. And the whole idea of having multiple transaction processors working together, that means that one or more can go out of service for a while and then come back online, and the system will not have been disrupted. But you can also have a loss of service if you have one of these hash power attacks. It seems like as a practical matter, we do need something like the network access rules, but it does seem like there's nothing in the network access rules that says that any order to freeze or move coins has anything to do with any court ruling that has been issued somewhere. So it seems like, according to the rules, they're going to issue these freeze and move notices, and then I'm not aware that there's any kind of guarantee on their part that they're going to legitimately correspond to the DAR, the digital asset recovery ruling. So presumably there would be some kind of legal recourse in the case that they issued an invalid notice, but I'm not sure what that would be or how that would work.
Jacob?
Well, I think part of that goes with the network alert key and how they're sort of fiddling with that. That's just from what little I've read. But I think what you said about it being, legal or enforceable is definitely like a huge, Like, to me, that's a very important, contentious, and fuzzy kind of thing that we can't really, take stock of, considering messiness surrounding BSV already. And yeah, so I don't think, maybe Americans will be different than Europeans.
Right.
And all that. So it's really a big joke to me.
Well,
I'm anti all that personally.
and we're gonna, just to plug on that, we're gonna do another follow-up space with a panel on that where we can go deep on it. So let's kind of defer the NAR and DAR conversation because it's so extensive to that space if we can. Unless there's anything else to add, Daniel, on that. It's very involved discussion and
Yeah, I'm not really the right person to be
yeah.
asking about it,
But we are-
but that's what I got on it so far.
we are going to do another space on that with a panel, Jacob, and we're going to go through it in more detail. So it'll be coming up. Michael is supposed to, Michael and I are going to, Michael's going to talk to me about it. He did a poll and there was just kind of split contention. So who else has their hand up, Mila? Who else do we have that is on stage?
I don't see any hands up.
Okay. Who's on stage left that
Put
has
your hands up.
Daniel, Bitcoin Broadcast, or Crypto Spartacus? Did you guys have anything to add? And it looks like, is there people trying to get requests to speak, Mila? Mila, are there people requesting to speak?
We have Hector Lopez.
Okay, can somebody drop down so Hector can jump up here?
Yo, I just want to say
One
thank you for the
second.
discussions and sharing, Daniel. I'm gonna drop down and let Hector come up. I think he's got something to say. So see you guys.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Hector, you're up next. If you want to add Hector, Mila, please. Hector Lopez, welcome, buddy. How you doing?
Doing good. Can you guys hear me?
A little bit closer to the mic, if you could.
One sec.
Okay.
How about that?
All right, Hector. Now we got you. Go ahead, buddy. How you doing?
Okay. Good. I just wanted to clarify just two things. One was that Zach made a quote where, he said something about that BSV is a more subsidized chain because of the participant is willing to take on a lower fee rather than like BTC, where it's like more of a healthy competition of fee because of the dynamic fee market. But the problem is that fee market that's being done dynamically in the most sense and the average day-to-day use is not actually any substantive value to the miner, because if you actually look at the publicly available miner data that we have, which are like the filings and the 8K, I mean the 10Ks and the 10Qs, you can see that most of the revenue that comes from these miners is actually being subsidized in the form of security offerings. So they're selling more shares to acquire more cash, taking on debt to take on more, to get more cash, to then deploy and buy more coins, or buy more infrastructure to then get more coins. So they're offsetting their own expenditures by taking on more money or selling off more securities to be able to hold those coins. Because you see, like, for example, Mara, which is one of the largest publicly available traders, miners, their holdings of Bitcoin goes up over time. Like from last year to this year, they basically doubled their size and amount of Bitcoins they own, but they're losing money. So you can't really lose money while the only thing you do is make Bitcoins. So how they do that is they sell shares to acquire to keep the Bitcoins, or they take on debt to keep on the Bitcoins. So it's a false sense of reality that to think that like they're doing well, because they're not actually doing well. And when they have to actually sell them, they sell them and the price goes down, which creates a spiral loss, right? Like they claim that as like, oh, look at us, we made money last quarter. But if you look at how they made money last quarter, they made money last quarter because the price went up of the coin they're holding, not because of the actual operations of the business, right?
I see.
So
Price went up.
that's a huge risk to the business, and that would obviously go down. And you're seeing these people taking on different chains and taking on different ways of making money. Marathon, again, for example, they've moved to Caspa and have started mining on Caspa to generate more revenue because obviously what we're saying, and so they also are doing other things to they're the creators of the superhighway where you can bypass all the nodes and get larger transactions onto the blockchain through a premium service. And that's basically all I wanted to say, was just the subsidies are just not in your face where we're lowering fees. It's happening behind the scenes where you just don't see it.
So the subsidies, okay. That's on the BTC chain, Hector?
Right, exactly. Yeah, like all these miners are doing it. Like the real cost of a transaction on Bitcoin today, on BTC today, is roughly about $80 per transaction. So if people are paying below $80 per transaction, what's happening is someone else is paying for it. They're subsidizing in some way. It's very similar to Uber. Everyone thought a $4 Uber ride was amazing because it got me from A to B, but in reality, it's being subsidized by people selling shares and them taking on debt that they were losing money to get this market share into this industry. That's the same thing that's occurring here.
How can you support that you're saying there's an $80 cost to do a transaction on BTC? Is that
because all you need to do is take the current hash rate and the cost of the current hash rate divided by the number of transactions that actually occur per day.
wow? Daniel, any comments on that, or anybody else? Questions?
Well, that was very interesting, and thanks for the update. And also, Satoshi's point makes a lot of sense, that if you really thought that you were going to sell a whole lot of the transaction processing capacity and start if you were going to start selling a lot and earning a lot off of it, then lowering the fees to keeping competition out, that is the way to go. I mean, in the chain that is going to end up growing the most, you would expect there to be competition for lower profitability in the present. So, I mean, is that really going to happen? I mean, there's a way of looking at that that's very optimistic, but I think we've seen that Calvin Ayre has not correctly predicted what was going to happen in the past. So, but yeah, hopefully.
Hector, did you have any? Seems like you were, had a reason for bringing that up. So, do you have anything else to add to it? Hector Lopez. If not, let's go on over to. Is there any hands up on that you see, Mila?
Yes, we got Sparks here, who was up before. Now he wants to say something, and then we got BSV. I can't see what it says. The rest.
Sparks. Sparks. Is it Sparks Richard?
Yeah, my real name's Richard. I got the nickname Sparks.
I can barely
you're gonna
hear
have
you.
to speak up.
Can't hear you.
Oh, we got one of those infinite loops going. So let's mute for a moment, please. Mila, if you could mute him while he fixes that. Let's go over to somebody else. BSV Columbia, how you doing, buddy?
Good afternoon, Gavin. Good afternoon, Daniel.
Good afternoon.
It's a pleasure to hear you about. Okay, Daniel, you have said before that you have not been very successful in to try to get involved more people using Bitcoin or using the network. I think it's not easy for people to see the future, to see the benefits that we can have using Bitcoin. Is not for everyone to be a miner or to be a developer. And recently I have discussed it with a philosopher, a Spain philosopher, Juan Manuel Ferrero, and he defines Bitcoin as a tool that the ultimate purpose of Bitcoin is allow us to have a purpose. What do you think about that definition?
Well, I'm sorry, but I had a lot of trouble understanding what you were saying. Could you write that down? It's just that your accent was kind of strong for me.
Us Americans, we're very limited in our, our BSC.
Okay, I will repeat a short part. A philosopher that I met defines Bitcoin as a tool that could the final purpose of Bitcoin is allow us to have a purpose. What do you
Oh,
think about that?
allow us to have a purpose.
Yes.
Allow us
Okay.
to have a purpose. Okay. That's a philosopher's concept of of Bitcoin.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
Bitcoin allows us to have a purpose.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting. And yeah, I mean, that's a problem that I've run up to with other things, because you could say that that's kind of like what capitalism is like. It's like something that doesn't give you a purpose. It's something that lets you pursue your own purpose. And it turns out that that's kind of a hard sell for a lot of people. It seems like lots of people are looking for something that gives them a purpose. And so yeah, I mean, but maybe that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the Nietzschean Superman, because he's somebody who finds his own meaning in life. He doesn't have to take it from somewhere else. So he's maybe like the kind of guy who would like Bitcoin the way it is a thing that helps us with collective security, you know.
Okay, BSV Columbia, did that anything else? Seems like there was a reason for asking that or bringing that up. Did you have anything?
Okay. No, no more.
Nice.
I'm trying to explain to other people's out of crypto, people that doesn't know anything about cryptos, how to use the network or transaction by showing some application that can help them. For example, content creators can use platforms like to get payments, low payments, but in a big quantity. I think that the way to get more transaction in BSB is
More use.
show
More
more use,
utility.
but yes, use application that can help people to do something that
Yeah.
they knew it.
Something they want and use. So,
Yes.
all right, let me go over to Casey. You're back up here, Casey Nicole. Miss, we had your friend Craig Mason on earlier. That was somebody you recommended. So, do you have anything to add to that? The conversation there? We'd love to. Looks like you're able to unmute. Great. And if not, Mila, is there anything that you wanted to add to the discussion here? Lovely Shmila.
Not really. Thank you very
All right.
much.
Well, any other open forum subjects before we close this space down? We've had 2 hours with the Emperor of Bitcoin here, and I'm sure that his time zone, he's getting ready to celebrate the 4th of July. I'm sure he's a big patriot wherever he is. So, I don't know.
I could offer, if anybody wants to have an after space, then give a thumbs up or something like that.
Thumbs up. Thumbs up. All right. So we've gone about 2 hours. So is there any other last, well, we hear back from you from the Emperor of Bitcoin, any things, words of wisdom you can share with us that people really earn? Oh, we never really got to kind of finish the Craig Wright stuff. I mean, you met him in 2015 at that first conference. And so Zach was kind of probing you on that. Did you want to add anything else about Craig Wright? Do you have any?
No, I mean, I didn't meet him. He was just on video. He didn't.
Oh, he
go
was
to
on the
con-
panel. Yeah.
He was on video. He wasn't on the panel. He was on a video. He was not at the conference at all. But he showed up in a live stream at the live stream was broadcast at the conference, and he did talk to people who were physically present on the panel. But no, that was basically it. I almost completely forgot about it by the time he came out and started saying he's Satoshi and everything. But it took me a while. I was just like, wait a minute, wasn't that guy at that conference I saw? Oh yeah, But Yeah, I liked him right away. To me, he was exactly the kind of guy that I was looking for. And yeah, I mean, I just wish he had been around to give us some more guidance early on. I mean, well, I mean, no point in trying to relive the past, I guess. Of course, he was busy. He was working with the ATO.
So how do you think this is going to go? If you could see a crystal ball into the future with the rest of this Bitcoin space over the next few years?
Well, I don't know. I mean, things have been really, really tough lately. I never thought the BTC would be driven this high, and I didn't think. I don't know. I didn't think anything was going to work out this way. I mean, all I can say is BSV is really the only the only blockchain that's like a real potential product. Of course, it's always possible that it won't find its market, but there certainly have been bad times in the past that have led into really, really good times. So, that's all I can say. All I can say is I'm totally confused, and I have been for the last 10 years or so, and been working on trying to understand the situation, but I'm getting better at some things. But
Nice. Let me go over to Brett. He was the one that inspired this here. So as we close down, Brett, what else did you want to add here, or comments, or in closing?
Sure. I'll just add that I think it's impossible to overstate the significance and importance of Daniel's ideas. And I just want to thank you, Daniel, because, when you're talking about not only an emergent technology, but also a complementary emergent philosophy. And, the other day I heard a phrase or a quote that I'd never heard before, but I found it really interesting. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I want to spend some more time thinking about it. The person said that as our technology changes, our ethics change with it. And I found that really interesting because, we can measure our technology really easily, and we can't measure our ethics very easily, or our, social contracts with each other, except through our own interpretations of them. And those interpretations are naturally, for very good reason, they're subject to our own perspectives. And if we have, different altitudes at which we're interpreting the world, we may perceive the same events through different lenses and through slightly different means. And, that all contributes to this, this struggle that I see Daniel in, and he talks about it a lot, as he is sort of on the leading edge, I think, of both understanding that not just the technology, but the way in which the technology is a leading indicator of the transformation that we're going through culturally and societally for our ethics. And so I want to just say that, you do so much to lead that discussion on both fronts in that respect. I think that they're really complementary. You're a great teacher. Some of my favorite content that Daniel talks about is the most basic content. And this is, I think, the value that you get with really great teachers, is that, you can really listen to them break down something, for example, what is money? When Daniel's really getting into the weeds about economic theory and stuff like that, then it may be a little obtuse for some people. But when he has these great lectures, you can find them online, just literally the basic question, what is money? And when you really break that concept down, first of all, it's an intimidating concept, because money, like yen, touches everything. And so when it's one of those things where it's hard to really wrap your head around. And actually, I think that's a metaphor for one of the things that Daniel was talking about earlier, which is, one of the pain points that we have in the emergence of this, updated or more culturally relevant ethics that's emerging with the development of Bitcoin technology, is that part of the problem that individual users face within that network is sometimes that they don't understand that they are a part of that network to begin with. And so it's their lack of understanding their orientation to it that makes them so that they act as, without awareness to it. They just become like a bull in a china shop, and they're just, they're not aware that there even is this small world network that they're part of. Even if they're using BSV for payments and things like this, right? They're just sort of like oblivious to it or unaware. And so one of the best ways that we can build the small world network is to orient them. But a lot of times what we try to do when we try to orient people to the network is really try to pull them into us and say like, hey, you need to come be a part of the thing that we have going on over here. But there's this really great quote that I love, which is, wanting to change the world without discovering your true self is like trying to cover the world with leather to avoid the pain of walking on stones and thorns. It's just much easier to wear shoes, right? So we're all the time trying to pull people into our network and say, hey, you need to understand and get hip to the things that we're doing in this small world network over here. But also human nature is resistant to that. What we can do to be better agents of this freedom, this liberty, is go with our shoes, go into the den of the thieves, right? And walk among them. And it's our willingness and our courage to do that and to say, hey, I can leave the network behind, because at the end of the day, the network is just a construct. It's just something that's imagined in a way. It's just that it's, so I can leave, and this is the value that Bitcoin brings. I can drop off the network and I can come back after I've been in the den of thieves, and I can trust the proof of work to understand that there is still a credible, reliable set of information that I can reorient to, and maybe I will have become different. Maybe I will have brought a few people along with me. But it's that ability to constantly be transforming even our own concepts of ourself and the network that we belong with, that I think ultimately all of this technology is leading us to. And I think that I want to thank Daniel for just really being such a great educator about how that relates to us on a personal level.
Thank you, Brett, for the last words there, and Daniel, and thank everyone for joining in. I'm going to end it there. We're over 2 hours.
Okay, Gavin, no words from
for a bit.
You got my
Bitcoin.
questions, but no questions.
I'm going to end it there, guys. I'm sorry I can't get to everybody right now.
We'll discover why, Gavin. We'll discover why.
Hello. Yeah, please. I'm not sure what that was, but yeah, no interrupt. Yeah, thank you, Daniel, for coming on with us, and we're grateful for the last words of wisdom there from you, Brett, and Daniel as well. So thank you, guys. We'll do another space with the NAR and the DAR that Jacob had requested in the near future. So thank you, Casey, Mila, everybody else. All right. We'll see you at the top.